There is something curious that happens inside the human mind, beloved ones. Something so common that almost nobody questions it, and yet so powerful that it shapes entire lives, entire relationships, entire destinies. And it is this: a few words spoken by another person, perhaps carelessly, perhaps honestly, perhaps even lovingly, can disturb your peace for hours, for days, sometimes for years. And if you look carefully at this phenomenon, you may discover something unsettling. Because the suffering is not always created by the criticism itself, but by the part of you that cannot bear to be seen imperfectly, the part that desperately wants to appear right, intelligent, attractive, successful, spiritual, or worthy in the eyes of others. The part that has spent decades constructing an image and then mistakes the image for reality. And because this image is fragile, because it is made of opinions, memories, comparisons, and borrowed ideas, every criticism feels like an attack upon your existence itself. But beloved ones, what if the pain you call sensitivity is not sensitivity at all? What if it is identification? What if it is the ego trembling because reality has touched one of its hidden wounds? Sit with this possibility for a moment, because it may change the way you understand yourself forever. Human beings love to describe themselves as sensitive. They say, I am easily hurt because I feel deeply. They say, I care too much. They say, I am emotionally vulnerable. And certainly, there is such a thing as genuine sensitivity. Genuine sensitivity is openness. It is the capacity to feel beauty deeply, to experience compassion naturally, to be touched by music, silence, suffering, and love. Genuine sensitivity makes you more alive. But what most people call sensitivity is often something very different. It is defensiveness disguised as depth. It is insecurity disguised as refinement. It is the ego demanding protection while pretending to be delicate. Notice what happens when someone criticizes you. Immediately the mind becomes busy. It begins defending itself. It searches for explanations. It remembers past injustices. It prepares counter arguments. It tries to prove that the other person is wrong. Why this urgency? Why this agitation? If the criticism is false, it can be ignored. If it is true, it can be learned from. Yet the ego cannot tolerate either possibility easily, because the ego survives through a very particular illusion, the illusion that it already knows who it is. Beloved ones, from childhood, humanity begins constructing identities. A child is praised for being intelligent, and slowly begins believing I am intelligent. Another is praised for being kind and begins believing I am kind. Another is admired for beauty, achievement, humor, spirituality, or success. Gradually, these descriptions become identities. The child forgets that they are temporary labels and starts treating them as permanent truths. Then life inevitably challenges these identities. The intelligent person fails. The beautiful person ages. The successful person loses status. The spiritual person becomes angry. And suddenly suffering appears because the image and reality no longer match. The ego experiences this mismatch as a threat. It does not ask, what can I learn? It asks, how do I defend myself? Therefore, criticism becomes frightening. Not because criticism is inherently painful, but because identity is fragile. Look carefully at people when they receive criticism. Very few actually listen. Most are waiting for their turn to defend themselves. The ears are open, but the mind is closed. They hear words, but they do not hear meaning. They are not interested in truth. They are interested in survival. The ego treats criticism the way the body treats danger. It mobilizes immediately. It contracts. It protects itself. But beloved ones, consciousness is different. Consciousness is curious. Consciousness does not ask, how do I preserve my image? Consciousness asks, is there something here I need to understand? This simple shift changes everything. Suddenly, criticism is no longer automatically an enemy. It becomes information, sometimes useful, sometimes mistaken, but always an opportunity to observe yourself. And this is where the inquiry becomes fascinating, because you begin realizing that the deepest wounds are not created by what others say. They are created by the places where you secretly doubt yourself already. If someone calls you selfish and the accusation has no connection to your inner reality, it passes through you easily. But if somewhere inside you suspect there may be truth in it, even a small truth, then the words pierce deeply. The ego hates mirrors. It prefers compliments. Compliments reinforce identity. Criticism threatens identity. Yet, without mirrors, growth becomes impossible. Imagine spending your entire life avoiding any reflection that challenges your self-image. You would remain imprisoned inside illusion forever. Beloved ones, one of the strangest things about the ego is that it does not actually want truth. It wants comfort. Truth and comfort occasionally coincide, but often they do not. Truth disturbs before it liberates. Truth exposes before it heals. Truth dismantles before it rebuilds. Therefore, the ego becomes selective. It welcomes praise and rejects criticism. It embraces approval and resists correction. But reality does not operate according to the ego's preferences. Reality remains what it is. The person who cannot tolerate seeing himself clearly remains fragile, regardless of external success, because his peace depends upon continuous validation. Real sensitivity, however, moves in the opposite direction. Real sensitivity does not become weaker in the presence of truth, it becomes stronger. It develops the courage to remain open even when openness is uncomfortable. Imagine being able to hear criticism without collapsing. Imagine being able to ask, "Is there anything true here?" without immediately defending yourself. Imagine being able to remain curious about your own imperfections. This is not weakness, this is tremendous strength, because it requires security that does not depend entirely upon being right. Beloved ones, have you noticed how much energy people spend protecting their image? They carefully manage appearances. They choose words strategically. They hide insecurities. They exaggerate strengths. They create identities for the world and then spend years maintaining those identities. It is exhausting. Every performance requires energy. Every mask creates tension. Truth requires no performance. Truth is relaxed because it does not need protection. If you know who you are deeply, criticism loses much of its power. Someone may misunderstand you and you remain calm. Someone may judge you unfairly and you remain calm. Someone may point out a flaw and you remain interested rather than defensive. Why? Because your identity no longer depends entirely upon the opinions of others. The ego fears this freedom because the ego survives through comparison. It constantly asks, am I better? Am I worse? Am I admired? Am I respected? Every interaction becomes a measurement. Every conversation becomes a subtle competition. Therefore, criticism feels devastating because it threatens relative position. But consciousness is not interested in winning psychological games. Consciousness is interested in understanding. Once understanding becomes more important than appearing perfect, life changes dramatically. Mistakes become teachers. Failure becomes information. Criticism becomes an invitation rather than a wound. Beloved ones, this does not mean accepting every criticism blindly. Some criticisms are projections. Some are misunderstandings. Some are spoken from jealousy, anger, or ignorance. Awareness does not mean agreeing with everyone. Awareness means remaining open enough to examine what is said without immediate resistance. It means listening first and reacting later. It means allowing reality to speak before the ego interrupts. And perhaps the greatest freedom arrives when you discover that your worth does not depend upon being beyond criticism at all. Think about this carefully. The ego wants invulnerability. It wants to become untouchable. It wants universal approval. But such a life is impossible. As long as you live authentically, some people will misunderstand you. Some will criticize you. Some will dislike you. The attempt to avoid criticism entirely is another form of imprisonment. Freedom does not come from controlling how others see you. Freedom comes from no longer being enslaved by their opinions. Then a strange relaxation begins appearing. You stop trying so hard to appear flawless. You become more honest, more human, more real. You admit mistakes more easily. You laugh at yourself more easily. You learn more quickly because you are no longer defending an image continuously. Life becomes lighter because the burden of perfection has been dropped. Beloved ones, perhaps this is the secret hidden beneath all criticism. Every painful reaction points toward a place where unconscious identification still exists. Every wound reveals an attachment to image. Every defensive impulse becomes an opportunity for awareness. The question is no longer, why did they hurt me? The question becomes, what inside me was hurt? And then, who is this me that feels threatened? Follow these questions sincerely and they lead somewhere extraordinary, because eventually you discover something remarkable. There is a part of you that criticism cannot touch. Not the ego, not the personality, not the image, but awareness itself. Awareness observes praise without becoming inflated. Awareness observes criticism without becoming diminished. Awareness remains present while opinions come and go. The sky does not become smaller because clouds pass through it. The ocean does not lose its depth because waves become turbulent. Awareness remains. And beloved ones, the more deeply you rest in this awareness, the less desperately you need others to confirm your existence. Praise becomes pleasant but unnecessary. Criticism becomes informative but not devastating. Approval becomes welcome but not essential. Then sensitivity is transformed. No longer the sensitivity of wounded pride, no longer the sensitivity of fragile identity, but the sensitivity of openness, the sensitivity of presence, the sensitivity of a heart strong enough to remain vulnerable and wise enough not to mistake every discomfort for an attack. And in that transformation, beloved ones, criticism loses its poison, because the ego no longer sits at the center of your life demanding protection. Now there is observation. Now there is understanding. Now there is freedom. And when freedom flowers deeply enough, you realize something beautiful. You were never truly hurt by what others said. You were hurt by the image you were trying so desperately to defend. The moment that image becomes transparent, the wound begins healing. And what remains is not indifference, it is peace. A peace so natural and so quiet that the opinions of the world continue passing through your life like wind through an open window, touching you for a moment, teaching you perhaps, but never again imprisoning your heart. Beloved ones, the ego is extraordinarily clever because it rarely announces itself openly. It does not walk into your consciousness saying, "I am your ego and I am about to be offended." No, it disguises itself as dignity. It disguises itself as sensitivity. It disguises itself as self-respect, righteousness, morality, intelligence, spirituality, and sometimes even love. This is why criticism hurts so deeply for most people. The pain does not come from the words themselves. Words are merely vibrations in the air. The pain comes from the image you have created about yourself and your desperate need to protect it. Imagine carrying a fragile glass statue everywhere you go, polishing it endlessly, worrying about how it appears to others, fearing every scratch, fearing every crack. Then one day, someone points at the statue and says, "This is not as beautiful as you think." Immediately fear arises, anger arises, defensiveness arises. Why? Because your happiness has become attached to something fragile. The ego is exactly like this statue. It is an image made of memory, comparison, ambition, and fear. And because it is artificial, it must constantly defend itself against reality. Observe how quickly human beings become defensive. A small comment about their work becomes an insult to their identity. Comment becomes a personal attack. A suggestion becomes humiliation. Even silence can become offensive if the ego interprets it negatively. The ego lives in continuous interpretation. It does not see reality as it is. It sees reality through the lens of itself. If someone praises you, the ego expands. If someone criticizes you, the ego contracts. If someone ignores you, the ego feels invisible. This means your emotional state becomes dependent upon the opinions of others. And beloved ones, this is one of the most exhausting ways to live imaginable. You become like a leaf blown by every passing wind. A compliment makes you happy. An insult makes you miserable. Approval gives you confidence. Rejection destroys it. You call this sensitivity, but it is not sensitivity. True sensitivity is openness to life. This is dependency disguised as sensitivity. The truly sensitive person is not easily offended, because sensitivity without ego creates understanding rather than reaction. Imagine water. Throw a stone into water and ripples appear, but the water does not become resentful. It does not remember the stone for 20 years. It does not build an identity around being wounded. It receives the disturbance and then returns to stillness. Human beings do the opposite. They collect injuries. They preserve insults. They create museums of suffering inside the mind. They remember things people said decades ago and continue reliving them as if they happened yesterday. The ego survives through memory, because memory keeps wounds alive. Awareness, however, lives in the present. Awareness sees that each moment is new. Awareness does not deny pain, but neither does it worship pain. It allows experience to move naturally without transforming every wound into identity. Beloved ones, perhaps you have noticed something strange about yourself. Sometimes criticism hurts more when it contains a grain of truth. When someone accuses you falsely, the pain may disappear quickly. But when someone touches something you secretly suspect about yourself, the wound becomes deeper. Why? Because criticism does not create insecurity. It exposes insecurity that already exists. If I call a tree ugly, the tree remains unaffected because the tree has no image to defend. If I call the sky inadequate, the sky does not become depressed. But human beings carry hidden doubts everywhere. They secretly fear they are not enough, not lovable enough, not successful enough, not intelligent enough, not beautiful enough, not spiritual enough. Then criticism arrives and touches these hidden fears. Suddenly, the pain feels unbearable. Yet, beloved ones, the criticism is not your enemy. It has simply illuminated something already present within you. The wound existed before the words arrived. This is why awareness becomes transformative. The ordinary mind reacts automatically. Someone criticizes you and immediately anger appears, defensiveness appears, arguments appear, justifications appear. Awareness interrupts this mechanical process. Awareness asks, what exactly is being hurt right now? Not who criticized me, not whether they are right or wrong, but what inside me is reacting so intensely. Is it my authentic being, or is it an image I have constructed? This question is revolutionary. Because if you investigate deeply enough, you may discover something extraordinary. The observer itself cannot be insulted. The awareness watching the hurt remains untouched by the hurt. Thoughts become disturbed. Emotions become disturbed. The ego becomes disturbed. But awareness remains, like the sky remains untouched by storms moving through it. The ego fears this discovery because the ego survives through identification. It wants you to believe you are your reactions. It wants you to believe you are your wounds. It wants you to believe you are the story you tell yourself about what others have done to you. But beloved ones, you are not the story. The story changes. The characters change. The memories change. Even your interpretation of past events changes over time. Yet something remains present through all of it. There is an awareness that witnessed your childhood joys and sorrows. There is an awareness that witnessed your teenage insecurities. There is an awareness that witnesses your present experiences. That awareness has no scars. It has no image to defend. It simply observes. And this is why awakened people often appear difficult to offend. Not because they have become cold, not because they lack emotion. Quite the opposite. They have become so alive that they no longer need to protect an artificial identity. If criticism is true, they learn from it. If criticism is false, they let it pass. They do not spend days replaying conversations in their minds. They do not build emotional presence out of passing opinions. Their freedom comes from understanding that identity based on image is inherently unstable. If you live through an image, you must defend the image endlessly. If you live through awareness, there is nothing to defend. Beloved ones, the ego is like a house built from mirrors. Everywhere it looks, it sees reflections of itself. Every interaction becomes personal. Every disagreement becomes threatening. Every criticism becomes dangerous. Awareness is different. Awareness is like an open sky. Birds may fly through it. Storms may move across it. Clouds may appear and disappear. Yet the sky remains spacious enough to contain everything without becoming imprisoned by anything. Meditation is the art of discovering this spaciousness within yourself, not creating it, discovering it, because it is already there beneath the noise, beneath the fears, beneath the endless effort to become somebody. And once you begin tasting this inner spaciousness, something miraculous happens. Criticism loses its sting. Not completely at first. Old habits remain. Old wounds still appear. but gradually you stop taking everything personally. You realize people often speak from their own pain. The angry person spreads anger because he suffers. The arrogant person hides insecurity. The cruel person carries wounds he does not understand. Suddenly, compassion becomes possible because you are no longer trapped inside self-protection. You can hear criticism without collapsing. You can hear praise without becoming addicted to it. You become free from both. Then, beloved ones, a tremendous relaxation enters life. You stop performing constantly. You stop editing yourself endlessly. You stop trying to control how everyone sees you, because you realize something profound. No image can satisfy everyone. One person will admire you, another will misunderstand you. One person will praise you, another will criticize you. This has always been true and will always remain true. The ego wants universal approval. Awareness understands that such a thing does not exist. And in accepting this, an enormous burden disappears. Then criticism becomes a teacher instead of an enemy. Praise becomes pleasant but unnecessary. Identity becomes lighter. The heart becomes softer. And slowly, beloved ones, you begin discovering a form of sensitivity far greater than woundedness. You become sensitive to beauty, sensitive to truth, sensitive to silence, sensitive to the suffering of others, sensitive to the mystery of existence itself. The energy once wasted defending the ego becomes available for living. And perhaps this is the greatest freedom of all. Not becoming invulnerable, not becoming indifferent, not building thicker walls around the heart, but realizing that who you truly are was never the wounded image in the first place. It was always the awareness behind it. Silent, spacious, untouched, watching patiently while the drama of identity rose and fell. And when this realization deepens enough, beloved ones, criticism no longer feels like an attack, because there is nobody inside demanding protection. There is only awareness, awake within itself, is smiling gently at the endless games of the ego. And finally, perhaps for the first time, resting in the simple joy of being exactly what it has always been. Beloved ones, there is another trick of the ego that is so subtle, so deeply woven into ordinary consciousness that people mistake it for virtue itself. The ego does not only become wounded by criticism, sometimes it secretly enjoys being wounded. This sounds absurd at first. Why would anyone enjoy suffering? But look carefully. Have you not noticed how some people repeat the same stories of betrayal year after year? Have you not seen how they return endlessly to old injuries, polishing them, protecting them, showing them to others as evidence of how unfair life has been. The wound becomes identity. The suffering becomes personality. The hurt becomes a source of significance. And once suffering becomes identity, healing becomes frightening. Because healing would require letting go of the story of who you think you are. The ego would rather remain wounded than disappear. This is why people often resist freedom without realizing it. They say they want peace, but secretly they remain attached to their pain, because pain gives them a sense of self. They say they want to forgive, but forgiveness threatens the identity built around resentment. They say they want happiness, but happiness requires releasing the familiar drama that has defined them for so long. Look into your own life honestly, beloved ones. How many arguments continue inside your mind long after the conversation has ended? How many times have you replayed an insult, adding new details, imagining better responses, feeding anger with memory? The event lasted perhaps a few minutes, but the mind extends it for years. A single criticism becomes a prison sentence because the ego keeps reopening the wound. This is why suffering is often not caused by the event itself, but by our relationship to the event. The insult came and went. The words disappeared into silence. The person moved on, yet the ego preserves the memory because it needs enemies to maintain itself. Without conflict, the ego begins feeling uncertain. Without comparison, it loses its boundaries. Without stories of injury, it starts fading into the background. Awareness, however, has no interest in preserving suffering. Awareness allows experiences to arise and pass naturally. It does not cling to praise, and it does not cling to insult. It moves like the seasons. It allows winter to come and winter to go. Beloved ones, the ego is obsessed with being special. And strangely enough, suffering can become one of its favorite methods for achieving this. People become proud of their wounds. They believe their suffering is unique. They secretly think nobody has ever experienced pain as deeply as they have. This creates separation because the ego uses suffering to reinforce identity. My pain, it says, my trauma, my disappointment, my heartbreak. Notice the language carefully. Everything becomes possession. Even misery becomes property. But the awakened person sees differently. He understands that pain is part of being human. Loss is universal. Fear is universal. Heartbreak is universal. He no longer asks, why is this happening to me? Instead, he asks, How can this experience deepen my understanding? This simple shift transforms suffering into wisdom. The wound stops being an identity and becomes a doorway. Perhaps this is why some of the gentlest people you meet are not those who avoided pain, but those who pass through pain consciously. They have suffered, yes, but they refused to build a home inside suffering. They allowed pain to soften them instead of hardening them. They allowed loss to teach them compassion. They allowed disappointment to reveal the impermanence of life. Such people carry a different quality. They are humble because suffering humbled them. They are kind because they understand fragility. They are patient because they know how difficult life can be. Their wounds did not disappear. Their relationship with the wounds changed. They no longer identify with the scar. They appreciate the lesson. Beloved ones, this is why awareness is more important than self-improvement. Modern culture is obsessed with improvement. Become smarter, become richer, become more attractive, become more successful, become more confident. Even spirituality becomes another project for the ego. Become enlightened, become awakened, become extraordinary. But awareness is not interested in becoming. Awareness is interested in seeing. The ego asks, how can I become someone who is never hurt? Awareness asks, who is it that gets hurt? The ego wants a stronger armor. Awareness questions whether armor is necessary at all. The ego wants protection. Awareness wants understanding. Sit quietly sometime and observe what happens when somebody criticizes you. Do not justify yourself. Do not condemn yourself. Simply observe. Watch how quickly the mind starts building stories. Watch how memories appear to support your position. Watch how anger tries to protect your image. Watch how fear whispers that perhaps you are not enough. Observe everything without interference. And as you observe, you may begin noticing something extraordinary. All these reactions are visible. Anger is visible. Fear is visible. Shame is visible. Defensiveness is visible. And if they are visible, beloved ones, who is seeing them? There is an observer behind the drama. There is an awareness untouched by the storm. Remain with this discovery. It is one of the greatest secrets of inner freedom. The observer cannot be humiliated because it has no image to protect. The observer cannot be insulted because it does not depend upon opinion. The observer simply witnesses. Clouds come and go, but the sky remains. Waves rise and fall, but the ocean remains. Thoughts appear and disappear, but awareness remains. Criticism may disturb the surface of consciousness, but the depth remains silent. This silence is not indifference. It is not emotional numbness. The awakened person still feels deeply. In fact, he often feels more deeply than ordinary people, because the walls of ego have become transparent. He feels sadness without becoming sadness. He feels anger without becoming anger. He feels joy without clinging to joy. He experiences life completely while remaining free from identification. This is the paradox. Freedom does not come through avoiding emotions. Freedom comes through experiencing emotions without becoming imprisoned by them. Beloved ones, imagine how different your life would become if criticism no longer threatened your identity. Imagine listening openly without the need to defend yourself immediately. Imagine being able to admit mistakes without feeling diminished. Imagine being able to change your mind without feeling weak. Imagine being able to hear another perspective without experiencing it as an attack. Such freedom is not weakness. It is tremendous strength. Only fragile identities need constant protection. Truth does not fear examination. Reality does not fear criticism. The ego, however, lives through resistance. It says, I must always be right. It says, I must protect my image. It says, I must win every argument. And because of this, the ego remains in continuous conflict with life. It argues with reality itself. It resists change. It resists uncertainty. It resists imperfection. Awareness is different. Awareness understands that life is movement. It allows mistakes. It allows learning. It allows growth. It allows mystery. It has no need to appear perfect because it is not trying to become an image. And slowly, beloved ones, something beautiful begins happening. You become lighter. The endless burden of self-defense starts disappearing. Conversations become more honest because you no longer need to prove yourself constantly. Relationships become deeper because you are no longer protecting a mask. Criticism becomes information rather than humiliation. Praise becomes appreciation rather than addiction. You become available to life in a way that was impossible before. Then one day you may discover something that the ego can never understand. The goal was never to become immune to pain. The goal was never to stop caring. The goal was never to become invulnerable. The goal was to discover within yourself something deeper than pain, deeper than praise, deeper than criticism, deeper than every passing opinion. That something is awareness itself. Silent, spacious, unborn, unwounded. And when you rest in that awareness deeply enough, beloved ones, criticism still comes, misunderstandings still happen, people still project their fears onto you, life still brings challenges, but none of it reaches the center of your being. There is a stillness there, untouched by the world's opinions. There is a freedom there, untouched by approval or rejection. There is a love there that no insult can diminish. Then perhaps for the first time you realize that sensitivity was never the problem. The wound was never the problem. The criticism was never the problem. Identification was the problem. For the moment you stop confusing yourself with the wounded ego, the wound begins losing its authority. And in that freedom, beloved ones, you become soft without becoming weak, open without becoming vulnerable to every passing judgment, loving without becoming dependent upon love, and alive without fear of being hurt. Then criticism becomes a breeze passing through an open window, and you remain what you have always been, the vast sky, the silent witness, the awareness that nothing can wound because it was never an object among objects. It was always the light by which everything is seen. Beloved ones, this is not a philosophy to believe in. It is not another comforting idea to decorate the mind with. It is an invitation to experiment with your own consciousness. The next time somebody criticizes you, do not rush to defend yourself. The next time you feel hurt, do not immediately blame the other person. Pause, watch, feel the movement within you. Observe how the ego begins gathering evidence, preparing arguments, constructing stories about why you are right and why the other is wrong. Observe the speed of this machinery. Observe how quickly identity mobilizes itself for war. And in the middle of this observation, ask a simple question. Who exactly is being threatened right now? Is it your living awareness? Is it the silent presence that watches your thoughts and emotions? Or is it merely an image you have created about yourself? Stay with the question. Do not answer too quickly. Let it work inside you like a seed planted in fertile soil. Because, beloved ones, the greatest prison is not criticism. The greatest prison is the need to be somebody in the eyes of others. It is exhausting to maintain an image continuously. You must remember who you pretend to be. You must defend your reputation. You must protect your identity. You must fear mistakes because mistakes threaten the image must fear rejection because rejection threatens the image. You must fear criticism because criticism threatens the image. And eventually you discover something tragic. You are no longer living your life. You are managing a performance. You are acting constantly, adjusting constantly, worrying constantly about how you appear. This is why so many people are tired. Their exhaustion does not come only from work or responsibility. It comes from carrying themselves as a project that never ends. The awakened person becomes tired of this performance. One day he simply stops. Not because he becomes careless, not because he becomes rebellious. He stops because he sees the absurdity of it. He sees that no matter how carefully he constructs an image, someone will misunderstand him. No matter how kind he is, someone will criticize him. No matter how intelligent he appears, someone will think him foolish. No matter how successful he becomes, someone will envy him. The world contains billions of perspectives. To seek universal approval is madness. Once this madness is understood deeply, an extraordinary relaxation begins. The need to impress weakens. The need to defend weakens. The need to explain yourself endlessly weakens. You become simple. And simplicity, beloved ones, is one of the rarest qualities in the world. Because simplicity requires courage. It takes courage to be seen as you are. It takes courage to admit ignorance. It takes courage to make mistakes publicly. It takes courage to say, I do not know. The ego prefers complexity because complexity creates hiding places. Awareness prefers simplicity because awareness has nothing to hide. This admiration. Awareness wants truth. The ego wants certainty. Awareness is willing to remain open. The ego wants victory. Awareness wants understanding. Have you noticed how peaceful children can be before society teaches them to become somebody? A child falls down and cries, then laughs 5 minutes later. The child does not spend years developing an identity around falling down. The child is fluid, responsive, alive. Then slowly society teaches the child comparison. Be better than others. Be more successful. Be more attractive. Be more intelligent. Win. Achieve. Prove yourself. And gradually the child loses innocence and acquires ego. The spontaneity disappears. The playfulness disappears. Life becomes serious because identity has become serious. Everything becomes dangerous because everything can threaten the image. Enlightenment, beloved ones, is not becoming superhuman. It is recovering this lost innocence consciously. It is rediscovering the ability to move through life without carrying yourself as a burden. It is learning to laugh at your own ego instead of worshipping it. Imagine how much suffering would disappear if you could simply smile when the ego becomes offended. Someone criticizes you, and instead of becoming defensive, you notice the reaction arising and you laugh softly. Ah, there is my ego again, demanding protection. Suddenly distance appears. Suddenly freedom appears. You are no longer completely identified with the reaction. The storm still comes, but now there is also the sky. This is the secret, beloved ones. Freedom does not mean that storms disappear. Criticism will continue. Misunderstandings will continue. Some people will love you and some will not. Life will remain uncertain. The world will remain imperfect. Freedom means discovering within yourself something larger than all of this. Something spacious enough to contain joy and sorrow, praise and blame, gain and loss, success and failure. That spaciousness is your true nature. And when you begin living from this spaciousness, relationships change completely. You stop asking others to protect your identity. You stop demanding constant reassurance. You stop turning disagreements into battles. You can listen without fear. You can apologize without humiliation. You can forgive without superiority. Love becomes possible. Because love cannot exist where the ego dominates completely. The ego wants possession. Love wants freedom. The ego wants certainty. Love accepts mystery. The ego asks, how can I protect myself? Love asks, how can I be fully present? Beloved ones, the irony is beautiful. The more you try to protect yourself psychologically, the more fragile you become. The more walls you build, the more fearful you become. But the moment you stop defending the false, the true reveals itself as indestructible. Awareness does not need protection because awareness cannot be damaged. Opinions cannot wound it. Failure cannot diminish it. Time cannot age it. Death itself cannot touch it. Because awareness is not an object in the world. It is the space within which the world appears. Sit silently sometime and feel this directly. Thoughts arise, watch them. Emotions arise, watch them. Memories arise, watch them. Criticism remembered from years ago may arise, watch it too. Notice that everything changes except the watcher. The watcher remains silent, present, unmoving. This watcher has been with you since childhood. It watched your victories. It watched your embarrassments. It watched your heartbreaks. It watched your successes. And through everything, it remained untouched. You are that watcher, not the wounded image, not the frightened ego, not the collection of opinions you call your personality. You are the awareness behind all of it. And once this becomes more than an idea, once it becomes your living experience, something extraordinary happens. Criticism may still sting for a moment, but it no longer defines you. Praise may still feel pleasant, but it no longer controls you. You become available to life as it is, rather than demanding that life constantly protect your self-image. Then, beloved ones, sensitivity transforms. It is no longer the sensitivity of wounds. It becomes the sensitivity of awareness. You become sensitive to beauty, sensitive to silence, sensitive to the suffering of others, sensitive to the mystery hidden in ordinary moments. Your heart becomes softer because it no longer needs armor. Your mind becomes quieter because it no longer needs to defend itself endlessly. And one day you realize something astonishing. The goal was never to become unhurt. The goal was never to become indifferent. The goal was never to stop caring. The goal was to discover the part of you that was never wounded in the first place, the silent witness, the open sky, the awareness beneath every thought, the presence beneath every identity. Freeing that, beloved ones, and criticism becomes a passing sound. Freeing that, and rejection becomes an experience rather than a sentence. Freeing that, and praise loses its intoxicating power. Freeing that, and for the first time perhaps in your life, you stop asking the world to tell you who you are. Because now you know, not intellectually, not philosophically, but directly. And in that direct knowing, there is a freedom so immense, so gentle, and so natural that the old need to defend yourself simply fades away. Then life continues exactly as before. People still speak. The world still judges. Egos still collide. Storms still pass through the sky. But you remain what you have always been, the sky itself. Infinite, silent, aware, untouched. And in that untouched awareness, beloved ones, lies the end of psychological suffering and the beginning of true freedom.